I just finished reading Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, and I think she might be one of my favorite authors now. I'm in the middle of reading Babel, but I had finished the other audiobook I was listening to, so I decided to give Yellowface a spin since I was enjoying Babel so much. I only knew the basic premise going in, but that was enough to hook me. What jumped out to me the entire time I was listening to it was that Kuang has a real talent for writing piece of shit characters. In Babel, these cretins are always third person, but in Yellowface, she positions our protagonist as an absolutely awful human being, all through the first person. It presents this dichotomy where you're sort of perfunctorily rooting for June out of habit since the story is through her eyes, but you're also actively hating her guts for being an irredeemable cringe fest of a character. She makes one awful decision after another, constantly self-justifying her actions, continually framing herself as a victim. I kept thinking about how fun this must have been to write. Constructing a character that's supposed to be likable is a delicate matter. Writing someone who the audience is meant to despise really allows for whipping out the full arsenal of all the traits that you despise in others. With that said, Kuang doesn't make the story entirely black and white. The true victim of the story, Athena, is painted in an ambiguous light. At once a martyr for a cause, but underneath that designation, a complicated and unlikable person. There's a version of the story that is almost entirely a pedestal for the author to espouse their views on race, gender, the publishing industry, etc., with little left beneath that soapbox. But this book, much like Babel, allows Kuang to unpack her ideas while also giving us something unimpeachably fun to read. Her writing is sharp, and at least to my left-leaning mind, it never felt like she was trying to shove anything down my throat. Some of the observations that the main character makes about the people trying to take her down are kind of right on the money, and it made me squirm and rethink my own biases, realizing that I was agreeing with such a vile loser of a character. The world that this book presents is our own, with the characters existing as authors and artists alongside the likes of Stephen King and Neil Gaiman. Sometimes a book has so many cultural references that it starts to feel like a cheap trick, in the way that Marvel movies manufactured clapping in the theater, by saying with no subtlety to its audience, "You remember this? You like this, remember?" And in our IP-saturated media landscape, those tactics have become increasingly hard not to gag on. The way Kuang weaves her references into Yellowface is the opposite of that, using these real-world figures and concepts as touchstones that help position her characters as tangibly real, as characters whose struggles and worldviews are relatable and familiar. With a book that is so clearly trying to tell us something about our own world, Kuang leverages these references to drive her points home in a way that might have seemed more contrived and obvious had these characters been living on Earth B, with Stephen Kang and Nick Guy Monster, instead of the real-deal equivalents. It seems counterintuitive, but in this case, constructing a simulacrum of the real world would have pulled me out of the narrative, which is a testament to how smoothly she's able to stitch her ideas into the story. I'm sure this is part of the desired effect, but this book has made me start to think about my relationship to art created by people of Asian descent, and where my feelings stem from, whether positive or negative. There is a substantial amount of music, literature, movies, and media in general that I consume and have consumed with a palpable enthusiasm that has been shaped by Asian people. Probably more than half the people subscribed to this channel clicked that subscribe button because I talk about Haruki Murakami on a regular basis. I love the works of Banana Yoshimoto, Bong Joon Ho, Ken Liu, Ted Chiang, Han Kang, Stephen Chow, Park Chan Wook, Sayaka Murata, the list goes on. What is it that resonates so much with me about their work? Would I feel the same way about the work if a white person had written it? Or a person of any other race? Am I fetishizing art by Asian people for some subconscious reason that might not even be that hard to interrogate? I'm not sure. I'd like to think that I love these books and movies and everything else because the creator made something brilliant and singular, but I know things aren't always that simple. Maybe it boils down to the algorithm chucking me into a bucket full of work that studies have shown I might be predisposed to liking. Yellowface, at the very least, has certainly made me want to dig into myself a little bit more on that front. Now that I've finished this one, and Babel isn't far behind it, I'm even more interested in checking out the Poppy War than I was before. All I've really heard about it is that it's really sad. I read a lot, maybe not as much as your average booktuber, booktalker, bookgrammer, and it's not often that I read something that makes me want to go inhale the rest of the author's bibliography. Kuang's style isn't radically abstract or remarkably difficult to get into, qualities of which I like to pride myself on being able to digest. But she is able to jam a litany of ideas into the framework of the 2 books I've read by her so far, and she pulls it off as deftly as a doctor giving you a shot before you even realize they've done it. I can't wait to get into the rest of her work, and if you haven't already, I hope you do too.